Why India faces LPG shortages but not petrol or diesel. Have you noticed how cooking gas or LPG often faces shortages in India, while petrol and diesel seem to flow without interruption? Today, let's break down why this happens. We'll explore what LPG actually is, how it's produced, why India depends so heavily on imports, and the challenges in its supply chain. By the end, you'll understand why your kitchen cylinder is harder to secure than a tank of petrol. LPG stands for liquefied petroleum gas. It's a mixture of two hydrocarbon gases, propane and butane. At normal temperatures, these are gases, but under high pressure, they become liquid. That's how they're stored in cylinders. There are two main ways LPG is produced: natural gas processing. Raw natural gas contains methane, ethane, propane, and butane. When processed, propane and butane are separated to make LPG. About 60% of the world's LPG comes this way: crude oil refining. When crude oil is refined through fractional distillation, LPG forms at the top layers. Around 40% of global LPG comes from refineries. So, LPG is not a standalone product, it's a byproduct of other processes. LPG is vital, not just for cooking, but also for vehicles and industries. India is the second largest consumer of LPG in the world. But here's the catch: only 40% of India's LPG needs are met by domestic refineries. The remaining 60% is imported. And where do these imports come from? Mostly Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. In fact, Qatar alone is India's biggest supplier, thanks to its massive natural gas reserves. Now let's answer the big question: why LPG shortages but not petrol or diesel? India imports 85–90% of its crude oil. But crude oil can be stored for 60–90 days, giving refineries a buffer. Even if imports slow down, petrol and diesel production continues. LPG is different. Remember, 60% of India's LPG comes via imports, and 90% of that passes through the Hormuz Strait. Any disruption there, like geopolitical tensions or blockades, immediately affects supply. Recently, conflicts in the region have blocked shipments, leading to shortages in India. Petrol and diesel, on the other hand, have multiple suppliers, including Russia, and can be stockpiled. That's why their supply remains stable. Could Indian refineries just produce more LPG to solve the problem? Technically, yes, but there are limitations. Upgrading secondary units, processes like fluid catalytic cracking, FCC, can increase LPG output, but upgrading these units requires huge investments and time. Crude oil quality, light crude, yields more LPG, but it's expensive and less available. Heavy crude produces more diesel and tar, not LPG. New technologies, units like propane dehydrogenation, PDH, can boost LPG production, but they're still being developed in places like Kochi. And here's the catch: refineries can't just produce LPG alone. Increasing LPG output changes petrol and diesel production too. Since petrol and diesel are more profitable, companies hesitate to prioritize LPG. Even when LPG is available, distribution is tricky. Unlike petrol and diesel, which can be stored underground at pumps, LPG must be bottled in cylinders under high pressure. A single cylinder contains LPG at 5 to 10 bar pressure. In liquid form, it's 270 times denser than gas form, which makes transport efficient. But bottling requires specialized plants, tankers, and strict safety measures. If even a small delay happens, say a tanker doesn't arrive, backlogs build up quickly. That's why you might wait days for a cylinder, while petrol stations rarely run dry. So, to sum it up, India's LPG shortage isn't about lack of crude oil. It's about dependence on imports, vulnerable supply routes, and complex distribution systems. Petrol and diesel are easier to store, more profitable, and have diversified suppliers. LPG, however, is fragile in its supply chain. In the long run, India may need to diversify LPG sources, invest in new refinery technologies, or shift households toward alternatives like induction stoves and electric cooking. Until then, the kitchen cylinder will remain more vulnerable than the fuel tank. Now you know why LPG shortages hit harder than petrol or diesel shortages. If you found this explainer useful, share it with friends and family. It might just help them understand why their cylinder booking takes longer than expected. Like and share this video supports us subscribing.